All right, we are live. It is a couple minutes before 8, actually just a minute before 8. And I'm just going to give it a moment and let people kind of trickle in, and then we'll get started. So if you join, I'm just waiting for some people to come in, and it's 8 o'clock right now. I'm just going to give it like a minute or two. So I will be right back. I should just be one more minute here. All right, it is about 8:03. I see we have some people that have joined, so let's get rolling here. Hopefully everyone can hear me. All right, so hey everyone, and happy Monday. I hope you've all had a great weekend and you're off to a great start for your week so far. I just really quickly want to mention one thing before we get started. I recently got a Fitbit, and I know that some of you out there have a similar device like a Jawbone, a Fitbit, whatever, Body Media. Um, I found a website called Matchup.io, and it will allow all of us to kind of compete on the number of steps taken. So it supports Fitbit, Jawbone, Withings, Garmin, Misfit, and the Moves app. And I think you can actually, if your smartphone counts your steps too, you can have it sync to that too. Um, Unfortunately, Matchup.io is only an iOS app, but Android users can actually just go to the site in your browser and initiate a sync. What that'll allow us to do is, regardless of which device we have, it'll allow us all to have people, even if it requires an additional step to make it sync, especially on Android. So I feel like the more people we have competing, better it'll be, simply because the more people in there, there'll be some gaps covered. Like, for example, this was kind of revelationary for me, is that on days when I don't go to the gym, my steps are probably not going to break 5,000 or 6,000, and that's pretty bad. So I should probably look to get some more walking in there. And I think I'm going to start setting an alarm to remind myself to get up from my desk and walk around a little bit once an hour, because there are some days when I basically have my head down and I'm working, and I look up and it's 6 hours later and I haven't moved at all. So that's something I'm definitely looking to improve for myself. So just keep that in mind. I'd encourage everyone to sign up and add me as a friend. Hopefully this week I'm going to be launching a group challenge. It's capped at 20 members, so don't wait to sign up. And once you do sign up, add me as a friend. My username is Chuck Gross on there, so it's easy to find. All right, so let's get to the questions. Let me actually make sure I have the Q&A app turned on, because I was about to say I have it on. Yes, the Q&A app is now turned on the sidebar. Just a reminder, there is a slight delay between when you ask your question and when I see it, so just make sure you get your question in there early. And after I go through the pre-submitted questions, I will check to see if any questions have been submitted during the Hangout. Alrighty, so our first question comes from Jackie, and Jackie asks, what do we do with complex or not so complex foods that we don't know how to quantify? So things like homemade tuna salad or spaghetti with homemade sauce or a random slice of cheesecake that got an experimental nibble. So thank you for the great question, Jackie. That's a really good question. The good news is that there is a hopefully non-confusing way to go about this, and that's the recipe feature of MyFitnessPal. So for your example of spaghetti sauce, you could go to the recipe box and create a recipe for it. The way that would work is you would track the components for the sauce once as an entire recipe, and then you have the calories and the macronutrients for the entire batch. And from there, you would just weigh you'd weigh the batch and say, this batch is 1,000 grams or whatever. And basically from there, you could decide what portions you want to do. And you go to your recipe box and say, I want to add a portion to my food today. And it automatically adds it into your food today. So you don't need to keep making or figuring out on the fly what something is. So you've probably heard me say that we often make foods in a big batch and freeze them. So what we do is if we have a gigantic pot of chili, we figure out what all the ingredients are, like so many cans of beans, 5 pounds of meat, and we make a recipe out of that and just basically weigh what the entire thing weighs. And then we figure out how many portions we want to portion it into. And then we know exactly how many calories a portion is once. And anytime we are eating that for dinner, it's as effortless as saying, going to the recipe box and saying, add this. It's actually one of the quickest ways. So again, doing batch meals and also doing a recipe for it is a huge time savings on the tracking aspect as well. So yeah, there's also, so you'd find this under on the website for MyFitnessPal under food and then recipes, and it's recipe box. They also have a feature where if you have a website recipe, like it's just a link that someone gave you, you can paste it in to the recipe and import that recipe into MyFitnessPal. And it will go out and it'll find nutritional information for all the ingredients, and then it'll basically give you what the entire batch is. And I think the only thing it sometimes has difficulty finding is how many recommended servings the recipe is from the website. Someone had posted a link earlier today about a ham and breakfast cup that you make in muffin tins, and it should be reheatable, so like it's a repeatable breakfast. And I actually pasted that into MyFitnessPal, and it was able to figure everything out and give me 12 servings, because I assume a muffin tin is 12 servings, how much it was for one of the muffins in there, and I was able to easily just add it to my calorie totals for the day. So that should make your life easier in that regard. It's basically a little bit of work once, and then from there on out, as long as you don't vary the recipe too much, it's just a matter of tracking it just by clicking on it. You don't have to figure anything out usually, especially if you take the big batch and weigh it into portions. So definitely give that a try. I'd be curious to see if you have any feedback. And again, as always, if you do find any recipes that are awesome, please share them, and I'll make sure that they get around to everyone. All right, and on to the next question. So this question wasn't specifically asked in response to the Hangout, but a couple people this week have asked me this question separately. So there's apparently a good need to answer it. So I'm going to answer it here in case anyone was wondering. Since it's the summer in the US, and last week we kind of talked about, being in the summer in the US, people are going on vacation, and they were curious about what to do for the nutritional aspect of kind of sticking to their lifestyle changes without kind of blowing everything up and stressing out over it. So we covered that last week. So the question this time was, what about working out during my vacation? So to those of you asking, first I want to say it's great that you want to be proactive about your upcoming vacation or trip. So I've been on a few trips myself recently, 1 or 2 vacation type trips, 1 or 2 business oriented trips. And so some of the tips that I'm sharing with you are things that I've done myself or things that I've done previously that have worked well for me. I tend to treat business trips and vacations in the same fashion for the most part, although for certain vacations, I will specifically avoid working out and not worry about nutrition habits at all, just to kind of take a mental break from all of that, maybe once a year. Um, in those particular cases, what you do after the vacation or trip matters the most. Because many people tend to extend their vacation habits to well past the point when the vacation is ended. And that's kind of where you get into trouble. For the most part, even if you ate all the terrible things you possibly wanted in terrible quantities and didn't move around at all, as long as you return to your nutritional habits the next day, within a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks max, your weight will probably be the same on the scale where you were the day you left for vacation, or pretty dang close to the point that it's not worth worrying about. So, so for an example, the type of vacation kind of dictates what I end up doing. So something like Disney World, that's incredibly active by default. There's lots of walking. So in that particular case, I wouldn't even worry about trying to work out. You basically, if you plan to work out, you're going to be so tired from walking like that, it's probably not going to work out. If you can stick to that and do that, more power to you, go for it. I would probably save my energy for the sheer amount of walking, so you're not, getting tired and cranky by the end of the day. So, but for something that's like, say, the beach, that's doesn't necessarily mean active. Many people, it depends on you, of course, but many people love to just go to the beach and sit in a beach chair for 8 hours a day and then go out to dinner and go drinking. I've never really liked just sitting in the sand myself, but I'm not necessarily was always active either. I would usually be in the arcades and the air conditioning, but that's neither here nor there. Point is, you can make a beach vacation a little bit more active, doing things like walking on the beach, renting a bike, walking around on the boardwalk. Things like that can help it be a little bit more active. So other than that, what I would recommend doing is seeing if the hotel or resort, whatever, has a gym there. And just because hotel gyms or resort gyms tend to be crappier than what you'd find at like an actual like big gym, doesn't mean you can't get a good workout in. If you need some assistance with that, let me know. But generally, you'll be able to do things like higher volume and reducing your rest times between exercises, and just kind of going in a circuit fashion, meaning you can do one set, switch exercises, do one set, switch exercises, and you can still get a pretty good workout in. With faster paced workouts like that, you could even work out every day that way. Another option would be like body weight work, where you do like push-ups and body weight squats and things like that you can do every single day. However, if there's no gym available, or if you're not a fan of doing those alternate types of workouts, I'd recommend looking around on Google and seeing if there's a gym nearby. Similar to the habit of looking at restaurants in advance, it helps if you do the research beforehand, so you know what your options are as far as when you get there, rather than having to do it on the fly. You're more likely to actually go if you've planned in advance where you're going to go and figured it all out. With that said, I mentioned the body weight thing. That's certainly an option too. If you're concerned about losing progress and strength gains, if it's like a week or 2 weeks, you're really unlikely to lose much strength. In fact, taking a break from working out, if you're consistent with it, can actually be a benefit in the long term, both mentally and physically. So, if it's a week or two, I wouldn't really worry about it too much. Just try to be as active as possible and go from there. It's really not worth worrying about. If you're someone that actually frequently travels, though, please let me know, and we can kind of work something out. Some of the tips that I mentioned, like looking for a gym that has like a day pass, or if you're whatever gym you belong to has a travel pass, or if you're able to kind of pick hotels based on what their gyms look like, something like that. Worst case scenario, it's not a bad scenario, but worst case scenario would be we can go all body weight stuff, and possibly take some things with you that you could incorporate and fit in your luggage, like a resistance band where you can do exercises by hanging off like the doors or the door frames, things like that. We can kind of turn your hotel room and your body into your gym instead as like an alternative. But like I said, if that applies to you, let me know and we can discuss that. Oh, and one last thing on that subject. Sometimes if I'm only gone for a few days, like if I'm taking a trip, like 4 or 5 day weekend, I will kind of arrange my workouts before the trip to like be like right before, and then on the back end, like when I come back, I'll fit a bunch of them out at all during the trip, but I've worked out immediately before and immediately after. So that's something else you can consider. All right, the last submitted question was from Joe. So Joe, this is a great question. Joe asks, is it possible to get too much sleep? I find myself waking up around 4 or 5 a.m. most days, but I usually turn over and head back to sleep for another couple of hours. Sometimes I will then feel sluggish and have a headache, much like how I feel on a weekend when I stay in bed way too long. For reference, I usually go to bed around 12:30 or 1 and wake up around 7:30 or 8. Could it be that maybe it's too little sleep? Joe, that's a great question. So thank you for asking that. So what you're describing is generally referred to as a sleep hangover, and they call it that because it feels very similar to a drinking-induced hangover. Evidence from recent studies shows that if you oversleep in the area of 9 to 11 hours, you may develop like memory problems, and you may be at more risk for like diabetes and heart disease. The good/bad news is that if you undersleep, you have the same risks for those same problems, but they're also increased. So it's not good to get too much sleep, and it's not good to get too little sleep. There's like a perfect amount, and that kind of sounds like Goldilocks and the Three Bears or whatever. So just the right amount. So the reason why you feel so bad when you switch between like not getting enough sleep, maybe on weekdays, to oversleeping on weekends, is that your body runs off of a biological clock. It's called like your circadian rhythm. And basically what happens is that your cells are being told something different than what's actually happening, meaning they're going to fatigue, they're going to get tired, your cells are going to get tired from a miscommunication. So essentially, you may be crawling out of bed at, like you said, 8 a.m., but your cells in your body start their energy cycle at 7 a.m. or earlier. So this is basically the same way that jet lag works. The best thing you can do for long-term health is to try to find a balance between your weekend and your weekday sleep cycles. So rather than having the extremes of only a little bit of sleep on weekdays and lots of sleep on weekends, it's better to have something that's consistent and in the middle, of balance. Yes, I know it's no fun to like feel like you're going to bed early on the weekends. That's certainly a choice you can make. I mean, I'm a parent of 2 young kids, so it doesn't really matter to me. I don't really have a social life as much as I used to, so that's not really, it doesn't really matter. And kids don't like to sleep in on weekends anyways, so to me that's just kind of a natural rhythm. But it turns out that that's what's optimal for human health in the long term anyways. So as far as waking up and not feeling great at a certain time, there's actually a calculator that I'd recommend you look into. I've shared it with a couple people that recommended some sleep problems, and it's called Sleepy Time. So the website is sleepytime.me. So it spells out Sleepy Time, or you can Google Sleepy Time calculator, and it will give you some great information about what time you actually need to be asleep in order to wake up feeling refreshed. The idea is that if you wake up when your alarm wakes you up, and it's like a random time based on when you went to bed, you could possibly wake up at the wrong time in the middle of a sleep cycle, and that will leave you feeling like you didn't get any sleep at all, groggy, headache, that type of stuff. So if you use a sleep time calculator to figure out like, I need to be up at this time, so I need to actually be asleep by this time, but I know it takes an average of 15 to 20 minutes to fall asleep, I need to go to bed a half an hour earlier than what this says. Then it's at that point, if you're actually falling in those times, you can just wake up and pop right out of bed and feel energetic and not need like half a pot of coffee to get moving out the door. So just to give you an example, I'll put my time in here. I want to be up at 5:30 a.m. So that means that in order to fall in line with a circadian rhythm cycle, sleep cycle, I need to be asleep, like falling asleep at 8:30. So that's not going to happen tonight. 10, 11:30, or 1 a.m. So that means that tonight, I actually try to follow this myself. So I'm not just recommending you go to this. I'll try to actually start my bedtime routine at 9:35, and I'll try to actually be in bed by 9:45 and asleep by 10. And that way, when I get up at 5:30, I can basically just roll out of bed and start my day without feeling like I'm half asleep still. So like the calculator actually tells you, it takes the average person 14 minutes to fall asleep. So you kind of have to time it like I just mentioned. So I'd recommend checking that out and seeing if that helps. But just to recap, like I said, there is such thing as negative health effects from too much sleep, but those negative health effects from not enough sleep are much worse. So, all right, I think that covers all of the submitted questions, and I'm going to see if anything was asked. Oh, I did not realize we had my cat in the background for this. Sorry about that. He's all right, I'm going to give it another moment. I don't see any questions asked right now, but I'm just going to give it another moment or two. I'm going to check around to the different groups and see. All right, I don't see any questions submitted. Let me see. We will have a hangout next week as well. So thank you everyone that submitted questions. These have been some great questions. Yeah, I believe next week should be either Monday or Wednesday. I'll let everyone know in advance. So, but as always, if you come up with a question after the hangout ends, just please ask and I'll get you an answer as soon as I can. Everyone have a great night and I'll talk to you soon. All right, take care.